Good morning. My name is Kandice Fogle. This year I turned 50 years old. In 2008, I was diagnosed with intrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma. I was symptomatic, but not based on what literature was on the website. Kept going to the doctor, something's wrong, something's wrong. It was kind of a progression to the next doctor and a progression to the next doctor, who finally ordered a CAT scan, and there was a 9.5 centimeter mass in my liver. To which my primary care physician responded, and I've heard this story again many times, you probably had it your whole life. It's a hemangioma. Like, really? Because I had my gallbladder removed last year. And I have a CAT scan from then, and there was nothing there. Well, yeah, if you want to get me that, go ahead and get me that. To his defense, there's just not enough information out there. I really had to self-advocate. I really had to fight to get to the right place. Unfortunately, I eventually ended up at the Methodist Liver Center in Houston. We did a biopsy, confirmed that it was cancer, and I was scheduled for a resection shortly after Christmas. We did not get clear margins, and I'm alive. We did not get clear margins. It was on my portal vein. So there was hope that when they got in there, it wouldn't actually be involved with the portal vein, but it was. So once I healed, I had high fraction radiation. During this point of trying to get in at MD Anderson, and sadly there was some delay on my spouse's end, who was not encouraging that. So I showed up at MD Anderson about midway through the radiation treatment, and they're like, you're kind of half baked. We don't want to intercede right now. And I got it, I understood, but I really felt like they would have done things differently, was the impression I got. I started with my chemo regimen of gemcitabine, cisplatin, and I got to see Dr. Fogle, who I had him advise my oncologist, who was a general oncologist. And I'll never forget, because Dr. Fogle said, there's a medication out there, and forgive me, I'm gonna say the brand name because I can't pronounce unless you want to help me pronounce it, but it was Tarceva. And there was a lot of hurdles to overcome with that, because I knew that, I had to have some genetic testing, had to see if insurance was going to approve it, had to see if I was going to tolerate it, and then was it even going to work? And so while I'm with the general oncologist, I mentioned Dr. Fogle was looking into this for me, and he said, there's no evidence that works. So later he said, I was just at a conference, though, and your doctor was speaking. And I'm like, okay, check. I need to become Dr. Fogle's patient. So I got on the Tarceva. It wasn't easy, but for some unknown reason, I could tolerate it. And continued with a pretty strong regimen for a while, and kept pushing for, the more information you read, it was clear, surgical removal is the cure right now. And I was pushing for that everywhere I could, and everywhere my files were submitted, everyone said, you will never be transplanted. You're not eligible. You don't meet the criteria. We do not transplant intrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma. But Dr. Fogle and I know he does this with everyone, so I know I'm not special. I know that he makes everyone special. But he took such a vested interest in my care. And I remember having a scan, and I was in radiological remission. What? Really? I had recurrent disease 6 months after, and I may have skipped this, my resection. I had the radiation, but by the time I was doing the gem cis, I already had 2 more tumors in different places. So I know through his pushing, and he'll never admit it because he's so humble, that he kept pushing my liver transplant team, who was around the corner. And this word has come up a lot this week, and it's collaboration. And that's what it's taking. And Stacy, thank you, because you created this incredible foundation and established a forum where all these great minds could come together and collaborate. And so I want to say something to all of you amazing scientists and researchers. I believe you're going to find a cure. I know you are. I know you are. I'm so impressed by the immunotherapy that Melinda has had great success with. And I hear different encouraging stories, and really none of them are the same, which I understand makes this cancer so hard to really pin down and know what the right treatment is, know what the risk factors really were. And it just blows my mind how brilliant you are. And I think about how dedicated you are and the time you give up. And you know, I liken it to when you get the diagnosis of cholangiocarcinoma, I liken it to being lost at sea at night, and it's dark, and you cannot see light anywhere. And you don't know if you're just going to drown and die there, or you're going to fall asleep and drown. But really, you're just like, if there was just somebody who could see me right now, someone who was willing to walk through this with me, someone who is willing to take a risk and push the envelope and push the unknowns and not go by old statistical data, which I have to tell you, please update it. Please update it, because there's some old data that I've heard today or this week. So I was evaluated for a transplant. And just that fact alone was a miracle in itself. I got impatient because it took the board about 8 months to decide whether or not to put me on the list. And as I pushed to meet with another hospital, you know, I appreciate candor, and I think most patients do. They were all gung-ho until they did a scan, and, you know, I went from radiological remission to back to showing 2 masses. And the surgeon I originally met with refused to talk to me again, sent in someone else, and he said, unfortunately, you're experiencing the bureaucracy of organ donation. And he further went on to explain to me that it's a numbers game, and that, you know, because we want high success rates on transplantation, it's easier and it's better, and forgive me if I'm offending anyone, but, you know, I'm here for a reason. I'm alive, and there's a reason I was invited, and I have to share the story. But there's something wrong with a system that rewards people who have polluted their body with drug abuse, alcohol addiction, and the I don't cares of the world and whatever happens. And the mother or the daughter, or, you know, the brother, or the innocent person who was just living life and woke up one day and they said, you know, you have this cancer, and you may have 3 weeks, you may have 12 months, you may have a year and a half, but we're not going to transplant you because there's a high risk that you may not make it. And what I am pleading with everyone here is give cancer patients an equal opportunity that you would give everyone else. Why do we have to be on the extended criteria list? Why do we have to be the subclass of people? You know, let's fight for a cure and not, you know, success statistics. Let's break the chains of this horrible disease and take some risk. And I had a surgeon who did just that, who was told, don't give her false hope. Why would you tell her you're going to transplant her? Why would you tell her she's going to live? Dr. Jobly kept encouraging me and pushing me, and this surgeon kept pushing his board. And you know what? He was angry about it, and he saw my kids. And from day one, for me, this wasn't about me. It was about the little girl. And every night I put to bed, and we said our prayers, and she was too young to know, but she knew, and we never said anything. But she's like, God, if mommy dies, let me die with her. That's what my fight was about. My fight was about raising my children. And I can't even imagine for those of you who've lost someone to this disease. And for me personally, I have to tell you, it's easier to fight it than to watch someone suffer. And I was watching my children suffer. So, in my third year of a disease that resulted in me having, I don't know, Dr. Jobley, maybe a dozen ERCPs, which was I was getting infection and pancreatitis and I sepsis, and I lived in the hospital. My kids' friends probably thought they were all spoiled because they had iPhones, because that was my method of communication. I did not have a good support system at home. There was a facade of it, but it was the medical teams, and it was the nurses, and it was the doctors that allowed me to feel that my life mattered. And I believe today the reason my life mattered is to be bold in what I'm saying to you right now, and to give people encouragement who back home are said, you're not going to make it. I had my pastor call me and ask me to prepare my memorial. Well, wow, thanks for the vote of confidence. I did, I wasn't afraid of dying. I just didn't want to leave my kids. So I had progression of the disease, and it had metastasized further, and my labs were indicative of that. And then Dr. Jobley had the task of telling me, you're no longer responding to chemo. We need to mix it up. And I left that meeting, and I went home, and I pulled into the Target parking lot, and I sobbed. And I sobbed and I sobbed. And one by one I called, my brother, my sister, a couple of people, and just said, hey, I'm done. I just want to tell you I'm done. And people had a hard time accepting that. And thank God, Dr. Jobley was one of them, because I kept telling him, I want to be a pioneer with you. I want to beat this. I want to give people hope. I want to show that there is survival in this. And he's like, you already are, and you will. And gently, I called him and I said, Dr. Jobley, I didn't indicate this before, but I just need to tell you I'm done. I was bedridden. My quality of life was pretty low. My kids were sitting there watching me die. And I was never of the opinion or the mind that, by golly, I'm going to go out fighting. I'm never going to surrender, because my goal was to fight until there was nothing left else to try. And I never got to that point, because Dr. Jobley was always presenting me options. But I was tired. I was weary. I was losing hope. And so he just gently said, because he reminded me, I postponed my chemo right after my resection, and said I wanted to spend some time with my kids, and then I had the reoccurrence. And he's like, I just want to ask you a question. He said, one time you said to me, had maybe I pushed harder, you might have reconsidered, starting the chemo early. And he's like, is this one of those times? How could I give up on people who hadn't given up on me? So I decided that I would, in fact, go with the new regimen of chemo. It also didn't hurt that Methodist called me and said, if you get off chemo, you're off the list. But it's kind of like, doesn't matter anyway. You guys, in my mind, I was just starting to I was losing hope. Before I ever started that next chemo, I got a call. It was an incredible day, because for most days, I could never walk my daughter down to the bus stop. It was just 2 doors down. I walked her down. I'm walking home, and the phone rings, and it's Methodist, and I'm like, oh, yeah, hello. Every other time I expected it to be the call. It was the call. And I got in my car by myself, and I flew down to the hospital. And as most of you are probably aware, that cancer patients are put on the extended criteria list, or orphan donor, for lack of a better word. And I always knew that if I was going to be transplanted, it was with the understanding that I was probably going to be transplanted with another diseased liver, but it was going to be a disease that was nowhere near what I was currently battling. Unbeknownst to me, once I was prepped for surgery and they were en route for my organ, it was death by cardiac arrest. The status of the patient changed, and the patient was brain dead. And every hospital in Houston started claiming that liver and saying it was theirs and I didn't deserve it and it wasn't mine. And you know, my surgeon just put up a hell of a fight. And he said, that's not how this works. You rejected it. It wasn't good enough for you. She took it. It's hers. I had a 2-day surgery. Pretty rough, I understand. I don't remember. I received a perfectly healthy liver. When they cross-sectioned my liver, I had 8 tumors. So I just want to kind of go over and challenge y'all, please change the criteria, because the criteria was at that time, and I don't think it's changed, cannot have a tumor larger than 3 centimeters, 9.5. Cannot be resectioned. Cannot have treatment, radiation, chemotherapy, guilty. Cannot have a needle biopsy, I had that day 1. Cannot have internal stents, 12, 13, 14, I don't remember. Can't have a percutaneous drain, had several of those. Y'all, I am 4 years cancer free. 4 years. So with no dishonor or offense to anyone, I heard yesterday that there's no survivors who had positive margins. Why am I not in that statistic? Someone else was here and heard there was no positive results in a trial going on, and she's experiencing positive results. Why are we not, as all these genius researchers are finding all of these cures? One of the doctors yesterday said, we're running out of time. Those cures are coming, but what do we do right now today? And I don't know if we've got to get in front of UNOS, if we've got to get in front of the board of directors at the hospital, but you know what? It's going to take risk and courage, and thank God I had a surgeon who was willing to put his world-renowned reputation on the line for me to have a chance to raise my daughters. And I don't know, like in Texas, if you register on your driver's license, you want to be an organ donor, you're an organ donor. And our donors have gone exponentially up. You know, well, do we need to ask them, if you had a chance to designate your organ, would you rather it go to a young mother who's a cancer patient? Or do you want to go on the safe bet? The people we've always transplanted, the people we know will get good results from. So, you know, ultimately, I acknowledge my Creator is the reason I'm here. But all of you are His instruments, and He works through all of you. And He blessed me. I moved to Houston 6 months before my diagnosis from a pretty darn small town. And I know I'm here for a reason. I thank you for inviting me to share my story. I've never been this full before. Dr. Javali can attest to that. But this is about the people at home. This is about the diagnosis next week. This is about let's bridge the gap right now until we get to, you know, the immunotherapy and maybe the preventions and the chemos that work. And come on, we know it works. I'm here. I'm standing here. And I feel like no one's noticing. And I don't mean you. I mean the community, the world. So I thank you. I thank you for hearing my story. And I just, my God, I love you all. I love that you would dedicate your life to this. And the people who keep pushing forward who've lost loved ones. So we're going to beat it. We're going to beat it. We already are. I have some of these. I don't have enough, but someone in my journey walked up to me when I was being tested for could I withstand a transplant, and I was praying at the time. And this nice old gentleman walked up and he handed me a stone, and on the stone it said believe, and I took that as confirmation of what I was praying for. So I made these. I painted Believe and have prayed over them. And I can make thousands more. I work now full time, like 60, 70 hours a week. It's crazy, right? And unfortunately, I'll let that interfere with me getting prepared for this meeting. But if you would like to receive a stone, I'm going to put these in the patient room. And I think I went over. I'm so sorry. But it's from the heart. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing that story. And I think it's safe to say that you're the reason we're here. So thank you.